welcome to another Faith Horizons podcast. Today I am privileged to be with Justin Lawson. Justin Lawson is involved with a ministry called Racers for Christ, and we're going to hear just a bit of his story and just about how this is like race car track racing, right?
Yep.
All right, so we're just going to hear a little bit about his story and just really excited about that. So just tell us a little bit about yourself. So did you just stumble upon racing when you were like 10 years old or 20 years old, or how did you find racing?
Well, I was pretty much born into racing.
Oh, that's great.
It goes back to my grandpa, Bill Lawson,
Wow.
who around the Kansas City area was a fairly well-known midget driver,
Oh, wow.
open-wheel driver, and he raced in the 1950s. Then my dad started racing in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
So I've been a fan my whole life.
Wow.
And we've mainly been focused on sprint car racing is what
Wow.
the world that we're from, sprint cars and midgets.
No, that's cool.
So I was a fan all growing up, and then decided to get into the promotional side of it, doing some media freelance kind of stuff in 2016.
Cool.
And things just kind of jumped off from there.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, so you didn't really have a choice to be involved with racing. You were.
Yeah, I've always known racing.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Like for me, for instance, I don't know racing, and I've never been a part of it. I'd like to get to go to one of these events sometimes, just to get some popcorn, some hot dogs, and watch people fly around a track.
Definitely. Hey, I'll definitely take you to a track.
I'd love to do it. So anyway, but. So just explain a little bit about the racing here, because you said something about open wheel and sprint racing. Mm-hmm. So I know NASCAR, and then I've seen like some old movies of people riding around, tracks with those big old winged vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking about when we talk about racing?
Okay. You brought up the movie, so
Yeah.
I'll throw in right now that my grandpa drove a midget that was driven by the actor Mickey Rooney.
Oh, wow.
In the movie The Big Wheel.
Oh, wow.
And that goes back to the 50s.
Oh, wow, gee.
Open wheel racing. So what that is, it's what it sounds like. It's a car that has exposed tires and wheels, as opposed to when you turn on the TV and you're watching NASCAR. Those are stock cars. That is not open wheel racing. Open wheel is midgets, sprint cars, micro sprints, which is different levels. Basically comes down to the size of the chassis and the engine size.
Oh, cool.
Micros run like motorcycle engines.
Oh, cool.
Where sprint cars are big V8s, 410 cubic inch, 360 cubic inch engines.
So are they bigger than NASCARs, or are they just as big, or?
So if you are pulling up to a stoplight and you got a guy in one of the new fancy Camaros, it's revving his engine, and you're like, oh, that's a muscle car, and it sounds real tough. He might have like 200 horsepower or something, wow. The sprint cars are around 900 horsepower or above. So power to weight ratio, they're the fastest car in the world.
Oh, wow.
As acceleration wise.
That's crazy.
It's when you want the power, it's right there. The closing speed is just. If you look at some GoPro, I'll hook you up with some.
Yeah, I'll have to look at some sites here,
videos and stuff. But that'll give you a great idea of what kind of reaction these drivers have to have in their reflexes, and I have a great respect for all the drivers.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
That do this.
So then you said the other ones were like, you call them fender cars?
Yeah, we call, us open guys, we'll call it fender racing. That's not a derogatory term. It's just a descriptive term to designate what you're talking about here.
Okay.
But locally, around Kansas City, there's several tracks. I guarantee there's a track near all of your listeners or viewers within probably 30 minutes of their house. And they're typically around 3/8 mile, give or take, around the Kansas City area. Dirt oval.
Okay. And this is for the open wheel cars.
All the dirt track racing.
Okay.
So like stock, you have like stock cars,
cool.
Modifieds. One of my favorite classes, and my buddy Larry will be glad I brought this up, but the Show Me Vintage series.
Oh, gee.
Which it's old school cars. Like it can't be newer than I don't want to quote, but it can't be newer than like 1978 or something like that.
Okay.
But, it's like all the cool like roadster looking cars, or, those kind of cars that they make race ready with protection around them and things like that. So
that's so cool.
But yeah, so you have like your fender racing and your open wheel racing.
Okay, and you said 3/8 of a track
around there. Yeah, you have like your big half miles. Okay. The newest track around the Kansas City area is the I-70 Motorsports Park, which used to be I-70 Speedway.
Oh, cool.
And that's a big 3/8 mile, small half mile, with a bit of a dog leg on the back stretch. So it's kind of shaped almost like a D, kind of.
Okay.
And they reach some really high speeds on that track, over 100 miles an hour, if you could imagine getting up to that speed
on a dirt track
on a 3/8, and that's 3/8 if you stretch the whole dirt oval out. So that's 3/8. So when you make an oval out of it, it's 100 miles, and from here to here, pretty quick.
Oh my gosh, that's so fast!
A lot of action, a lot of speed.
Jiminy Christmas.
Yeah. So
so they're not. They're obviously do they have windshields on them? Are they closed?
No.
Or they're open, so they can just
it's open
because they have to keep ripping face masks.
Right. The tear-offs on the visor.
On their visors.
Yeah, those are important. Yeah.
I was thinking that because if you just had a windshield, it'd just get caked up. You'd have an accident.
Yeah, NASCAR tried to do dirt racing with the NASCAR stock cars at like Bristol Motor Speedway.
Yeah.
I was never that much of a fan of it. Kudos to them for trying to incorporate dirt and NASCAR, but they're kind of two different animals.
Yeah.
But yeah, you won't have a windshield. That's what the tear-offs are for.
Yeah, you need a tear-off. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like that's the same thing with dirt bike racing. You just have to tear it off because.
Right.
Well, that's crazy, man. This is a muddy sport then.
It is, yeah. And the track change. What I like about dirt track racing too, so NASCAR racing, the track changes somewhat. The more rubber that's laid down from the tires as you go down, which will get your lines where your grip is, your groove is. And dirt track racing changes even more so because you're dealing with Mother Nature. So the temperature has a lot to do with how much moisture is evaporated out of the track, whether it goes dry, slick.
Wow.
And as opposed to like a NASCAR track, you really don't want the dirt track to take on rubber. Yeah. You want to be able to slide, and your traction on a dirt track comes from where you're putting your tire in the moisture of the track as a tackiness. Like if you sprayed water down on a dirt track and gave it some time to dry so it's not sloppy. Yeah. After a while, if you put your hand down on the track and lift it up, you're gonna feel like kind of stick. It'll kind of stick
because
a little
bit.
Like
rubber. It has
clay.
a rubber, rubbery or clay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's what you're looking for,
cool.
And typically those parts are like darker, so you can kind of tell as a fan where the moisture is. And where you're wanting to put your car.
And the racers understand, hey, that's where the that's where the stick's at,
Yeah, and that'll change throughout the night. That you could go out for your heat race, which is like the beginning part of the night, and the track will be totally different from the time the feature event rolls around.
That's
so
crazy.
It's kind of the evolution of the track throughout the night, and the successful teams are able to gauge where the track's going and adjust their car accordingly. Right. And so that's kind of another fun aspect. A lot of people just think, racing, you're just going fast and turning left. There's a lot more to it than that.
There's a lot more to it than that.
And so credit to all the guys in the pits and the crew that are kind of the guys behind the scenes that really help the drivers be successful.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, well, we're talking about Racers for Christ, and I know that your dad is involved. We're going to get back to this later on, but your dad is kind of heavily involved. I mean, your family has been involved in racing, but your dad's, a little bit more involved even on a commercial level with racing. But as far as like Racers for Christ, when did you start with Racers for Christ, and then what led you to Christianity and racing and all this stuff?
Right. Okay. I was born into a Christian family.
Okay.
For the viewers that are listening, they might not know that I have one eye.
Okay.
For your viewers that are watching, I am. I have one eye. Yeah. So I was born with a rare retina cancer.
Oh.
And so my eye was removed at 6 months old.
Oh, gee.
And when I was 12 years old, I developed another tumor, like in my cheekbone, from the radiation treatments they had to give me when I was 6 months old.
Oh, gee.
So
that's very young to be getting radiation treatments.
Yeah, yeah, it was. But they were able to. This was in the 1976, 77. So
it's a miracle.
They were able to save my right eye. They did want to take both my eyes, but luckily I had a doctor who was my doctor till I was in my 20s that saved my right eye.
Wow.
And so when I was 12 years old and had that tumor in my cheek, that's when my family really kind of drew closer to the Lord. Obviously, when you have a sick child in the home, there's a sense of desperation there. And so we drew closer to the Lord, my parents did, and then decided to pull me out of my public school and send me to a Christian school.
Oh, cool.
Maranatha Academy, which my daughter attends there too. So and we actually have some of the same teachers.
Yeah, it's
so
right over there on
really
435 and Shawnee Mission Parkway, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Kind of, yeah. They have a new campus that
they
built.
changed, yeah.
So I went there starting my 7th grade year, and was very fortunate to go there, made some lifelong friends.
Oh, wow.
But I graduated from Maranatha, and then after that was kind of doing my own thing. I call it like the preacher's kid syndrome, where you're like surrounded by Christianity and kind of take it for granted. And not every kid does this that's brought up in Christianity. I did, but I kind of go through the motions,
Yeah.
And then I started experiencing some more health problems. I was diagnosed with diabetes. A year after I graduated. I've had melanomas. I've had basal cell carcinomas. So I've been through some health problems. And I was actually told that I would never be able to have children because of the chemotherapy that I had to have when I was young. So I grew up thinking, well, I'm never going to be able to have children. And my wife, Nicole, her mom works for my dad. And that's actually how we met. And I'm kind of skipping around here. But,
no, you're fine.
So,
you're good on this.
I saw Nicole's picture on her mom's desk, and I was like, who's that?
Who's that?
We need to meet. And she's like, no, you don't.
No, you don't need to meet.
But so anyway, that's how I met my wife. And then a few years later, we ended up conceiving Haven.
Oh, wow.
My daughter Haven, who actually had the same rare retina cancer that I did.
And I teach Sunday school here at Grace Point, so I know Haven. And she's absolutely fully
awesome.
Alive, and
totally
wonderful,
genuine kid,
incredible,
heart of gold, compassionate.
But she was born with the same.
She was born with the same retina cancer that I had. So, but technology's advanced a lot, since then, and so basically. Shortly after we had Haven is when I started getting involved in the media aspect of dirt track racing.
Oh, okay.
I grew up as a fan and just kind of had a natural knack. Once social media started taking off, I just kind of naturally fell into it with a skill for it. And I've always been a decent writer. And so that actually became my career with my dad's companies that I worked for as well.
Wow.
My dad, he started out owning, he started a flooring company, Design Source Flooring, which was successful.
Yeah.
And he did some sponsorship through some local tracks, started out mainly with Grain Valley, Valley Speedway in Grain Valley, Missouri.
Cool.
And after I started getting into the media, I did that until about 2 years ago when I was diagnosed with bladder cancer.
Oh.
And so the bladder cancer is what really changed the trajectory of our lives as a family and as our companies and my involvement in dirt track racing. So I came back after, during the whole battling bladder cancer through last race season. Mm-hmm. I was still doing the media thing. And that was after I say I came back to the Lord. I've been a believer basically my whole life.
Yeah.
But I came back to the Lord and really dedicated my life and really asked God to take me out of me. Use me for your glory.
Right.
Like I'm tired of chasing my own glory.
Yeah.
And it hasn't gotten me where I want to be or where I should be or giving me joy
Wow.
Not that I don't love covering dirt track racing, I do.
Yeah.
But that season last year, after I was totally rejuvenated in the Lord, and seeking God wholeheartely.
Yeah.
Going through the dirt track media thing with I had a show called The High Side.
Yeah, that's I heard about that.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you run the High Side for?
Off and on for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I had a great co-host, Ray Cunningham, High Banks Hall of Famer. He's a well-respected local media personality. Yeah. Great guy.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And he was my co-host. Ray the Reverend is his nickname.
Yeah. He said something about an open wheel driver. Oh, you wanted to understand the driver behind the visor.
Yeah, that was our slogan, is the driver behind the visor.
That's so cool,
because when you attend the races, you see the cars going around, you can identify that. You might hear the name over the speaker. Yeah. But this gives you a personality, someone to really root for or not like. Every fan's like, oh, I love him. He's a rival. I don't like him. It's competition. It's a sport.
Absolutely.
It's the same as rooting for the Chiefs and hating the Raiders. It's the same thing. But even though dirt track racing is one big family, it really is. But after that season last year of doing the dirt track media, I just felt like this emptiness. Like there wasn't, not an emptiness in me, just an emptiness in what I was doing. Like I wasn't finding fulfillment in it anymore. I wanted to do something for the kingdom. I was like, I want to make an impact in people's lives. I want to see people changed. And I want to, promote God like I promote racing.
So this is as early as last year, then, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah.
So and then I'm an open book as far as like my social media presence. Dennis Shrout, who owns Valley Speedway, I'll walk in, he's like, oh, there he is, the good, bad, and the ugly. Oh, yeah. Because I just lay it out there. If I'm struggling with something,
you tell people.
I'll say, whatever I'm going through, my followers and my friends and my family are going to know about it because I don't hold anything back.
That's so good.
A lot of people will paint a picture on social media of this perfect, glorious life. I don't do that because, for one, I need the support of my fellow believers and my friends and family. And two, if my struggle can somehow inspire or influence or help in some way or direct someone to the Lord, then I'll suck up the embarrassment of saying I've struggled with this.
Absolutely.
And so I'll put it out there. So
cool.
And through that, people could see a change in me and started saying, hey, you should really get involved in Racers for Christ. And Racers for Christ is something that I've heard about, I've known about. You always see the chaplains at the track, they'll always do the invocations before the races, things of that nature. And I always knew about it. I was like, I'll think about that. And then one of the longtime chaplains for Racers for Christ got in touch with me, and he's like, no, you really need to look at doing this. And so I was like, let's do it. So I signed up for the training, went through, the chaplain training modules and courses, and did what I needed to do to become a chaplain for Racers for Christ. And it's been probably the most impactful thing that I've ever been involved with.
Before, I want to talk a lot more about Racers for Christ and just kind of get some of your experience with that organization. I had never heard about Racers Christ before I had met you. So I'm like, these are clearly things that most people don't know about. But, before that, we had mentioned earlier in the show that your dad also, is pretty heavily involved even in like the commercial aspect of like racing. And so does he have a chassis company? Can you just tell us a little bit about that? What is that?
So Justin Lawson Chassis. Brian Cheney.
Brian Cheney. Okay.
Yeah, he is. He has a lot of history. His brother-in-law is Doug Wolfgang.
Okay.
Who goes back to 70s, 80s, and Brian really made a name for himself as being one of the premier, if not the premier, chassis builder in North America. Wow. Basically. And those chassis are even ran over in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
So he's synonymous with sprint car racing, and Brian and my dad we're discussing this next chapter in Brian's career.
Yeah.
And so my dad basically bought the operation from Brian.
Okay.
If Brian was in agreement to be the main chassis builder for him. So he's like, sure. So Brian was from the Dakotas areas, then moved down to Lincoln, Nebraska, where he's been building chassis. And then,
crazy.
My dad just built a new facility out at I-70 Motorsports Park in Odessa, Missouri.
Oh, cool.
Which it's a phenomenal facility. It's awesome.
Oh, cool.
And then moved Brian down here. And so they basically just got into that building like less than a month ago.
And they build something about like a wing. They build like a wing and then a wing and then non-wing.
Yeah, wing and non-wing sprint cars.
Okay, wow.
Which is an open wheel sprint car chassis, full size sprint car.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys that you hear in NASCAR either started in dirt track racing, progressed up through sprint cars, and then reached the NASCAR, even IndyCar status. I remember watching Jeff Gordon when I was 13 years old.
In a sprint car?
And sprint car midget. Yeah,
wow.
when he was 13 years old, racing with these full-grown men, which my dad's driver, he has a race team also, and his driver, he just turned, Xavier Doney, he just turned 18, I believe. And then Xavier's younger sister, Natalie Doney, she just turned 15.
And she's racing too.
And they're racing full-size 900-plus horsepower sprint cars.
That's incredible.
So,
see, you have to start young in this, otherwise you don't get. It's a
helps.
reflex game, right?
Yeah, it definitely helps. Yeah.
Okay, so then, so like I had asked a question to you earlier, not in the show, but like we had just talked about this before the show, is that I was thinking, well, sure, certainly the purses are much higher in NASCAR versus sprint car, but then you kind of corrected me. You said, "Hey,
they are for the most part, but that gap is closing,
okay.
And you'll see it continue to close. Like this last season, we had $1 million payout
for sprint car racing,
right?
So that's incredible. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So
it takes a lot of money for the guys that are full time, like World of Outlaws, High Limit, Sprint Cars Series. ASCS, all these series with the sprint cars, it takes a lot of money. So sponsorship is huge in racing. Sponsorship is key, really, unless you're independently wealthy.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, Dad's shop, Shanae Lawson Chassis, and it's also the same facility that Motorhaven is out of, which Motorhaven is like RV, classic car, boat storage.
Okay, cool.
So he has like top of the line buildings for storing your toys, basically.
Store your toys.
Or even contractors that have a lot of equipment that they might not have the garage space, or they might live in an apartment, might not have their own garage, things like that, where they can store it out there. So, and that's all on site. So Shanae Lawson Chassis is a building that they work out of here, which is huge, and then they have these other huge buildings for storage. And that's all on 10 acres that my dad purchased from I-70 Motorsports Park.
Oh, that's so cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about Racers for Christ. So you've been with them since you said March this year.
Yeah.
So since March, so that would be like a whole season. Is the season about over? Is it over now?
Yeah, it ended. Depending on where in the country you are, like down south, they're still racing. There's the Tulsa Shootout and the Chili Bowl coming up, which is an indoor race in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wow.
Which a lot of the big name guys that you would know from NASCAR will race there.
Oh, wow.
And that's a premier event
over
the winter months. So it's a glamorous sport in the sense that there's like some premier names that have really made it to the next level.
Okay.
So God bless those guys that are still involved in the dirt scene, bringing attention to it, because it is like its own world. Like the dirt track scene is basically like here in Kansas City. The dirt track scene is basically like another small town within Kansas City of like 8,000 people.
Yeah.
It is small town in the sense that everybody knows everybody.
Oh, wow.
The good and the bad, you know.
The good, the bad, the ugly, man.
When you need someone, they're there. It's very family oriented.
Oh, wow.
It's a very family oriented sport. Usually the crew is family members, friends.
So for Racers for Christ is an international organization, or it's just an American organization?
It is an international organization. They're primarily North America and the States and Canada.
Okay.
So they are nationwide. There's roughly 60 chaplains. There's 60 of us. And it's divided up into regions. I'm in Region 5, which is West Central. So
is there more than one person in Region 5, or is there like a couple or two or three of you that are in this area?
So like Kansas, Missouri, I want to say there's, roughly 20 or so of us.
Yeah, cool.
Or less, actually, just in Kansas and Missouri.
Yeah.
So like Kansas City region, I'm going to name drop some tracks here. So you have like Lakeside in KCK. You have Grain Valley in Grain Valley, Missouri. You have I-35 Speedway up in Winston. And I don't mean to leave out any tracks, but there's a good 6 tracks. Lucas Oil Speedway, they call it Diamond in the Dirt, in Wheatland, Missouri. And these are all tracks that you should definitely check out.
Within 45 to an hour of here or something
I-70 Motorsports Park.
Yeah, that's cool.
A lot of these tracks, most of them actually, are within an hour's drive of Kansas City.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Central Missouri Speedway.
Yeah. There's nothing in Tonganoxie, is there? I guess Lakeside is.
Most of the people from Tonganoxie will attend Lakeside.
Yeah, I would say Lakeside.
A lot of Tonganoxie residents.
Because I think Tonganoxie, shoot, these guys are riding bulls. I guarantee you they're racing.
A lot of Lakeside fans are from Tonganoxie there. But for a dirt track fan to travel across the country to attend the races,
no big deal.
It's a hardcore, die-hard
group of people.
If you're in it, you are fully in it.
That's so cool.
But Racers for Christ, it's an organization, a nonprofit that was started in 1971, and it started out mainly focused around the sport of drag racing. And so drag racing was, where it was at for years, and then kind of spread out to, they even have Rodders for Christ now for car shows, things of that nature. And but Racers for Christ is a nonprofit. I call it the ministry of presence. Is basically what we're there for. We're not out there, street corner preaching at people when they came to see a race. We understand that this is an entertainment sport. People are there to see a race. But fortunately, racing is one of those sports that still clings to traditional values of it's not frowned upon to pray in Christ's name at an event, so it's welcomed. The chaplains are welcomed. They every track I've been to anyway has wanted us there. And for a lot of new chaplains, it's kind of an adjustment period of getting to know the track owners and getting to know the race directors, and kind of, it takes a while to work your way into it. So I feel really blessed and fortunate.
You probably knew everybody.
So they've all seen my walk and my progression and know who I was before, know who I was during, and know who I am now. And we're all a work in progress. So I probably won't even be the same person next year that I am now, hopefully. So
so it's kind of like a pastoral role, like of just kind of going around and creating relationships and building relationships with people.
Oh yeah, it's definitely relationship based. It's all about relationship.
Cool.
But we give the invocations before the race. I will usually also sing the national anthem if I'm at an event.
Awesome.
I get asked to sing the national anthem, probably just because they're like, he thinks he can sing, and he already has the microphone for the invocation. Let him do it. But no, I enjoy it. I appreciate it. Alan Staley of Power Eye, he always asks me if I want to sing the national anthem, which I'm appreciative of. And
she get Haven up there one time and hand her the microphone.
She can sing, man. I keep telling her. she needs to let it out more. Don't wait like I did. Yeah, like just being too embarrassed. If you got a voice, anybody out there, if you have a voice, if you think you can sing, just let it out there. Like there's no reason to hold it in. I didn't start singing until I was like, around 30, and then joined a band and did the whole music scene for a few years, which was kind of detrimental to my spiritual walk for a while, singing in bars and stuff. But it's a lot of fun. But anyway, I got off track.
No, you're fine. We were talking about singing,
Yeah, but then you pray for the drivers and the drivers' meetings. I typically follow the open wheel events around, which there's usually like if I go to Lakeside, Tim is a weekly chaplain that's there at Lakeside.
Oh, cool.
And so they do a lot of fender racing at Lakeside. They have new management there this year. It looks like they're going to have some more open wheel and sprint car racing, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah. Is it a harder track or something like that? Or?
It's a bigger track.
Oh, it's a half. It's a half.
It's closer to a half mile.
Okay.
Closer to a half mile.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of history to it. There used to be a Lakeside where the Woodlands.
Yeah, I was saying the Woodlands Speedway with the greyhounds and the horse races.
That used to be old Lakeside Speedway.
Okay, yeah.
And then they moved, but kept the Lakeside name, and it's still been a historical track there.
Because I lived down the street from there for a long time. I mean, I never went. I think I never went to it, but yeah. I think I went to it to watch a movie one time.
Yeah. One local driver that frequented Lakeside, Clint Boyer. He was a well-known name there, and he raced with a guy that still races out there, Tim Carrick.
Wow,
He's a well-known local driver.
Yeah.
But we'll pray for the drivers' meetings, do the invocations before that. And, like I said, it's the ministry of presence. My wife is right there with me every. My wife, wherever I am, Nicole is. It's a team effort. So she hasn't been through the training. She might as well because she's with me everywhere anyway. But she has like a real heart for. This sounds weird, but she has a real heart for old people.
Oh, okay.
And so whenever we're out at the track, like she just seems to gravitate towards older people. You know? And there's a lot of older dirt track fans out there, and but it's like all the old people love Nicole. Like for some reason, it's just that's hilarious.
It's so sweet, yeah.
But she's always involved, but she has a real eye for people in need. Like when we were at Lake Ozark Speedway, and it was after the races, and I have my agenda and people I'm needing to talk to and go see, and you kind of get in the zone of the night, and I have my agenda, and Nicole always seems to like be just a foot outside of that, open to seeing what's going on around better than I am. So like there was a gentleman that was disabled, and he was hanging out by the pit gate after the races, and she was watching him, and she said she could tell that he was really wanting to go down there, but he wasn't able to go down there. So she told me, she's like, hey, let's go get the mule. That's like ATV and come back here and ask him whose pit he wants to go to. So I was like, who are you talking about? Like, and she, she went and was like, hey, we'll be right back. And went, my dad came up and took him down to his favorite driver's pit, and he was so thankful and stuff like that. And really one of the main stories that really has stood out to me this year is I have a good friend who I graduated Maranatha Academy with, Dr. Tom. It sounds weird to me calling him doctor now, but, Dr. Tom Blake, and he heads a Messianic community and has Grafted University, Grafted U, and they are well involved in the Chosen series with Dallas Jenkins.
Cool,
and they do kind of like a commentary on different episodes of the Chosen, and his courses are phenomenal. Right now, we're studying a Messianic worldview, one of his courses through them, and I'd highly recommend checking out his channel also.
Oh, cool.
But sorry, I'm name dropping.
No, you're fine.
But he called me up one day and was like, "Hey, did you ever say an invocation at a demolition derby?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, in Grain Valley Speedway. I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I have a member of my congregation that from an invocation before a demolition derby said that it put his life on a completely different trajectory for him and his family, where he came back to the Lord, and him and his family all got baptized and started attending church. And it all brought back to an invocation before a demolition derby at Grain Valley, Valley Speedway. And so that's so rewarding, because I basically view it as, all right, I don't want to give a whole sermon during the invocation and turn these people off or have their beer and just want to see some dirt track racing, but I want to plant a seed. That's what I try to do. So
you have like 2-3 minutes or something.
Not even that.
I was going to say barely
get right in there, man. I tell myself, you got 30 seconds to give somebody the gospel or to plant a seed.
I was going to say, if somebody was driving a monster truck, they'd just run you over if you kept talking. Hold on.
Yeah, and that is a fine line. If the promoter lets you give the invocation, you go on for 5 minutes. You might not be invited to give the invocation again. So you got to keep that in mind, But, I make it short, sweet, and as impactful as possible. And I always try to sneak in 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18, because that's the verse that really got me through last year in battling cancer. And, to rejoice always, to pray continually, to give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for us in Christ Jesus.
Wow.
And that's kind of a sequential verse for me. And how do you do that? That sounds like so hard. How am I supposed to give thanks in all circumstances when here I am with my 5th cancer that I've had, And to rejoice always, well, how do you do that? Well, it begins by prayer and consistent conversation with God, basically. So that's praying continually. And then once you do that, how I do that, because a lot of people are like, well, how do I pray? Or if somebody's new to the Lord, I don't know what to say when I'm by myself. I'd rather just listen to somebody else pray, and I'm in agreement with that. And I always tell people, just start by giving thanks. A thankful heart prepares the way.
That's so true.
And so by giving thanks is what I usually tell people to do, and to be thankful in all circumstances is just basically been my life song, honestly, for the last year and a half, and learning how to do that, and trying to stick to that, and finding, here's the thing about bladder cancer, okay? And another verse about, for no discipline is pleasant at the time, but painful, but later on, however, it produces a harvest of peace for those who have been trained by it. And so I gave myself bladder cancer. By smoking cigarettes for a couple decades. A lot of people don't realize that whenever people think about cigarette smoking and the adverse health effects of that, they think, lung cancer. Actually, the biggest outcome of smoking adverse health-wise is bladder cancer, because all those toxins,
the carcinogens,
that's where they have to go out of. So the number one cause of bladder cancer is cigarette smoking. And so but through that willful disobedience, and I'm not saying that everybody who's listening to this right now who smokes is going to hell, so don't get me wrong.
I think you're just saying that basically one of the consequences of smoking could be this.
Right. A lot of God's love for us is practical stuff. A lot of his will for us to stay.
Don't do this,
because
but
it's like kind of like our kids that they want to play around the stove or something, but they don't realize that
it's hot.
It's hot. It could scar you. It could burn you. Or there's a pot of boiling water that you could accidentally dump on yourself. But kids don't think about that stuff, and we're all children like that, spiritually kind of ignorant, really. Unless the more time we spend with the Lord,
you're saying that
mature.
You're saying the things that God says are oftentimes the rules that He makes or the laws He has are practical.
Right, exactly. For our own well-being,
for our own
well-being and happiness and joy. He probably saw. He's like, he's not listening. This is not going to lead somewhere good for him. But he used that. And I'm not saying that God was like, you're smoking, here, I'm giving you bladder cancer. No. It's just like a natural cause and effect of the fallen world that we live in, the sinful world that we live in, with things that are bad for us that it's in our human nature to do.
Wow.
And so that was another big eye-opener for me, was that there's things that we do on a practical level. Like, it's not like some mystical, God wants us to do this for this far-reaching, hard-to-grasp reason. It's just because He created us. He created our bodies. He knows what's best for our bodies and what's best to put in it, And so same thing with drinking, it's why we stopped drinking and stopped smoking cigarettes. I don't know what this show is rated, but with the smoking weed. That's why I stopped smoking weed.
Absolutely.
And in my men's breakfast, and you know what? You can seek God no matter if you're in addiction, if you're in alcoholism. It's not like you are separated from God. The only time you're going to be separated from God is if you end up in hell. That's what hell is separation from God. So if you're in the depths of depravity, God is still there. Like, God is still right there, like in earshot of you, like waiting for you to call out to Him.
That's so cool,
you know? And so with the weed thing, I remember specifically, and I shared this in men's breakfast, that I was there smoking a joint, reading my Bible. This was after I came to the Lord, but I still had a weed habit. So I'm smoking my joint, reading the Bible, and God told me, and I was doing it like this. I had my finger right here, reading along, and I had a joint right here. And God said, put the joint down for a second. I want to show you something, but keep your left hand in my word. And I was like, okay. So I put the joint down, and He's like, now look what you're able to do. And like, my hand was free. Like, I was able to like praise Him. I'm able to like lay hands on people. I'm able to work. I'm able to eat. I'm able to sustain. It's God sustaining me, but I'm able to not be tied down. He's able to use me. He's able to use me more, Like, now I'm able to use you. Now you have a free hand, As long as you stay in my word, this can go to work now. I can use you now,
Okay, but if you tie this up in worldly things and try to hold on to me, then I can't.
Exactly. It's basically the same as having a hand tied behind your back.
You might still be with the Lord, but you're like tied up over here.
Right. You're not reaching your full potential in the Lord.
Well, that's so good. That's a really good point.
So putting that down was kind of another step, like, in my journey.
It seems like the Lord has graduated you over and over again out of
for sure,
what could have been depravity.
Yeah, definitely.
What a great thing.
And with the even like in my my personality, things that I put focus on, with the media thing, I realized I was really kind of seeking my own glory. I got, I'm getting the most views on my show in Kansas City. I'm this well known. I have this many followers. And now it's like my view is like, wow, look at these followers, these people that haven't stopped following me because I'm sharing the Lord with them. Like, I'm going to share my struggle of my cancer appointment and my fear about that today with them. But show them that I'm still holding on to my strength being in the Lord.
Wow. Yeah.
Even though I am struggling with fear in this area. And not only that am I sharing that with them, they are like supporting me as well. And I think that when we do that, like through fellowship, when we are able to be there for each other and accountability wise, that it really strengthens.
So much more real.
Yeah, for sure.
For yourself. Yeah. I mean, because also you're able to be authentic to who you are, and then when people are still sticking with you, it's validating your authenticity. And people respect authenticity.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They greatly do. So.
It's really freeing, to be honest. Like,
True.
You don't have to keep on a certain persona or, I don't know. I'm just, I just enjoy being genuine, like, with people and sharing my struggles, because I don't have anything to hide, I don't have anything to hide. Why hide? Why hide what you're going through because somebody else could be going through that or more? And another thing I wanted to say about, I've shared about my health struggles and stuff, is that everybody is going through something and everybody's struggle is just as real and hard to them as somebody else's that may seem like their struggle is bigger. You know, somebody maybe listening to this, it's like, man, he's dealt with cancer. That I wouldn't be able to do that. You know, kudos to that guy or whatever, because they're going through a toothache. Well, their toothache right now is very real to them. That's in the front of their mind. They feel that pain every day. I'm not feeling that pain. They are. So that's like as real to them and as much of a challenge and as much of an opportunity to lean on the Lord as struggling with cancer or something is. You know, like I always tell people, praise God and thank the Lord. I have not had to experience, the loss of a parent or, some other things that some other people have had to do. So everybody's struggle is just as real to them, and God is just as able to deliver each of us from that struggle.
That's so cool, yeah. Well, we're winding down now. Would you mind just, I'm going to put down links for all of the little stuff we talked about, Racers for Christ, your dad's chassis company, and stuff like that. But would you mind just leading us out in prayer? I just feel like that we could do that.
Sure.
And we'll close.
Yeah. God, I thank you for this opportunity to be on this podcast here. Thank you for Nathan and him asking me to come on and share my testimony. And I thank you for Racers for Christ and their support to us chaplains and to the racing community. I thank you for Grace Point, God, and this church and what it has done in my family's lives, what it continues to do in our lives. I thank you for the fellowship here. I thank you for my brothers and sisters and friends and family that we've made here, God. I just pray that you'd bless this church, you'd bless this podcast. I pray that you would continue to bless Racers for Christ
Lord.
And the people that are support to us chaplains. I thank you for leaders within Racers for Christ like Eddie Bauer and Joey Keith and all of my fellow chaplains, God. I pray that this coming season that we would just continue to have an impact on the racers, the drivers, the crew, the fans, the promoters, the tracks. God, I just pray that you would just use Racers for Christ, Lord, to spread your word and to spread your kingdom, God, to further your kingdom, and that I would be a vessel in the grand scheme of things, God. This isn't about me. It's not about any individual chaplain, God. It's all the glory goes to you, Lord. I pray that everything that we do would point to you, would direct others to you and your truth, and that would always remain our focus, Lord, is to bring glory and to bring your kingdom to the world of racing. In the name of Jesus, we pray this.
Amen.
Amen.